The oppressive weight of the men's visit lingered in the courtyard, even as the dust settled from their departure. For Leonotis, the day's revelations had only just begun to sink in, chief among them the image of his mother, encased in ice and spirited away. He turned to Chinaka, his gaze fixed on her weary face, the most pressing of his many new questions tumbling out before he could stop it. "Why did you have my mother's body, and why did they take it?" Leonotis asked. Chinaka explained, "It's part of a pact Black Ace bearers make when joining their sect. They donate their bodies to further their studies. I had to keep her body on ice until they arrived." Leonotis, somewhat satisfied with the answer, looked at Chinaka. "Are all Black Ace bearers like those two?" "Yeah," Chinaka said quickly. "Too much time in the dark arts changes them all into horrible people." "Even my mother?" Chinaka registered what she had said and tried to backtrack. "Your mother was a little intense, but she was always loving to you at least." "And my father? Was she loving to him too?" Well, she..." Chinaka fumbled. "I'm glad my Black Ace went away. I don't want to turn into those guys," Leonotis said, a shadow crossing his face. "Your Black Ace hasn't resurfaced, but don't give up hope. In the meantime, Gethi loves his little training sessions with you. He says you've progressed further than anyone he's trained in the last 3 years," Chinaka said, trying to lighten the mood. Leonotis smiled, the brief darkness lifting. They heard the sound of a motorcycle approaching. Gethi appeared, riding towards them. "Ready for another lesson?" Gethi called as he rode up. "Yeah," Leonotis said excitedly, the tense encounter seemingly forgotten. "Hold it," Chinaka said, her voice firm. "Come inside. I have to tell you what just happened." Chinaka and Gethi walked into the clinic and told Leonotis to play outside. Leonotis stood outside by the open window, making sure they couldn't sense his presence as he listened to their conversation. The small clinic crackled with unspoken tension. Chinaka leaned against the rough-hewn table, recounting the encounter with Njiru's men, her voice tight with lingering anger and a tremor of fear. "They just appeared out of nowhere, Gethi. They wanted me to go with them, leave Leonotis behind like he was some burden." Gethi's usually calm eyes widened, a flicker of alarm crossing his features. "Chinaka, Njiru's men. They aren't common thugs. They're known throughout the territory for their brutality. They basically answer to no one. Crossing them." He trailed off, shaking his head slowly. Chinaka's jaw tightened. "I know. That's why I refused. I told them I wouldn't go anywhere without Leonotis." A protective fierceness shone in her eyes. A warmth bloomed in Leonotis's chest, spreading through him like wildfire. He pressed a hand to his suddenly flushed cheek. Only a couple of years had passed since their paths had intertwined, yet Chinaka had become his anchor, his son. Every word of praise, every gentle correction, every comforting embrace resonated within him, shaping his world. Gethi pushed a hand through his black locks, a worried frown creasing his brow. "We need to go see the king, now, before there are consequences. A direct request like that. Ignoring it will be seen as an act of defiance," Chinaka scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "That child? No way. Isn't he barely older than Leonotis? Probably just some pampered puppet king, pulling strings he doesn't understand." "I understand your reservations, Chinaka," Gethi said patiently, his voice firm but gentle. "But if the king himself has requested your presence, you have to go. The rumors. I've heard whispers of what happens when his will is defied. He may be new and young, but he wields considerable power. I'll go with you. My reputation, it might offer some protection, some sway." Chinaka remained unconvinced, her arms crossed stubbornly. Okay, fine. But how are we supposed to get there? Your motorcycle barely fits two, let alone all three of us. And Leonotis can't stay here on his own. Not after what happened with Njiru's men. They might come back. Gethi paced the small clinic, his brow furrowed in thought. We can borrow Mr. Wanjiao's old truck. He owes us for getting rid of that fox demon that was terrorizing the village. As for Leonotis, he stopped, a thoughtful expression on his face. I know a place to the west, Stillwater City. Someone there might just be able to help us. The silence in the small clinic stretched for a moment after Gethi's pronouncement about Stillwater City. Chinaka finally nodded, a reluctant agreement firming her expression. All right, Stillwater it is, but first... She turned towards the open window where Leonotis had been, her voice rising. Leonotis, come inside, quickly. Gethi echoed her, his tone a little gentler, but no less urgent. Leonotis, we need you. Leonotis, heart still thumping from their hushed, serious conversation, quickly smoothed his features and stepped away from the window, then walked around to the clinic door as if he hadn't heard a thing. Yes, he asked, trying to sound casual. Chinaka knelt before him, her hands finding his shoulders. Listen carefully. We have to go on a trip, all of us. A long one, Gethi added, leaning against the doorframe, his arms crossed. We'll be leaving early tomorrow morning, so you need to go pack your things. Just what's essential, all right? A flurry of questions bubbled up in Leonotis, but the grave expressions on both their faces told him this wasn't the time for them. He simply nodded. Okay, I'll go pack. Back in his small room, the news of an unexpected journey warred with the lingering unease from the day's events. He pulled out his worn satchel and began to gather his meager belongings, a change of clothes, the small wooden bird Gethi had carved for him, a pouch of dried herbs Chinaka insisted he keep. As he reached into the back of his small makeshift closet for a spare blanket, something heavy and rectangular tumbled out, landing with a soft thud on the packed earth floor. A black, leather-bound diary. His old diary. He'd found it tucked away in a loose floorboard in his old room, back in the grand, empty house that no longer felt like home, shortly after he'd come to live with Chinaka. He'd brought it here, to the small room behind the clinic, with a faint, desperate hope that its pages might unlock some of the shuttered doors in his memory, help him understand who he used to be. But every time he dared to peek inside, all it did was reinforce the chilling, terrible image he had of his past self, a cruel, detached boy he barely recognized and deeply loathed. His fingers trembled slightly as he picked it up. He hadn't looked at it in months. Hesitantly, he opened it to a random page. The neat, unnervingly precise handwriting stared back at him. His eyes scanned the lines, and a cold dread seeped into his bones. The entry was a vivid, clinical description of a dissection, methodical and emotionless, of a dog that, according to the entry, had still been alive when it began. Leonotis shuddered violently, a strangled gasp catching in his throat, and slammed the book shut. The metallic taste of bile rose in his mouth. He scrambled back, away from the diary as if it were a venomous snake. So Mr. Wanjiao was right, a sickening thought pierced through his horror. The old farmer had muttered darkly once, after finding his dog missing, that Leonotis had taken his hound. Chinaka had dismissed it as village gossip, but the diary entry, in its cold, stark detail, painted a truth far uglier than any rumor. Whatever had happened, whatever darkness had resided in him, Leonotis swore to himself, fists clenched, his whole body trembling, he'd never go back to being that person. He would rather die than become that monster again. The old pickup's engine coughed and sputtered, each lurch of the chassis sending a fresh cloud of ochre dust into the cab. Sweat slicked Chinaka's palms on the cracked steering wheel. Beside her, Leonotis pressed his cheek to the hot glass, the grit on the window imprinting a faint pattern on his skin. His knee bounced, a nervous rhythm against the worn seat, each distant shimmer on the horizon, a potential glimpse of still water. He tightened his grip on the tree branch sword Gethy had reshaped for him, the newly wrapped leather on the hilt, a comforting roughness against his palm. In the truck bed, Gethy stood impassive against the jolts, the midnight wind tugging at his dark locks as his hand rested near his own blade. The world outside was a blur of thorny scrub when shapes detached themselves from the deeper shadows of a roadside copse. Sunken eyes glared over jutting cheekbones from faces smeared with dirt and desperation. Chinaka stomped on the brakes, the truck fish-tailed, tires screaming on the loose gravel, and slewed to a halt, inches from a dusty ravine. "Don't move an inch," a voice, thin and reedy like a dry reed, pierced the sudden silence. A man, all angles and protruding bones, waved a sword so rust-pitted it looked more like a strip of bark. "Everything you got, now!" Before a word could be uttered in the cab, Leonotis was a blur. He scrambled over the side of the truck bed, his small face set in a surprisingly fierce scowl. "You'll get nothing." His voice was higher than he'd intended, a slight quaver at the edges, but his chin jutted out. He hefted his wooden sword, its point newly sharpened by Gethy's knife. A dark sliver, an arrow, sliced the air, aimed for the boy's exposed side. Gethy didn't seem to move so much as simply be there. Steel sang, a bright, ringing note in the darkness as his blade met the arrow, deflecting it harmlessly into the scrub. Leonotis didn't pause. He launched himself at the nearest figure, a youth whose tattered clothes hung on a frame almost as slight as his own. The young bandit's eyes, already wide with a mixture of bravado and fear, stretched further as the small boy charged. Leonotis swung his branch sword, a wild, desperate arc that connected with a sickening thwack against the bandit's shin. The youth yelped, hopping back and clutching his leg. "Leonotis!" Chinaka's voice tore from her throat, raw and sharp with terror. "Get back!" Gethy was already a whisper of motion. He dropped from the truck bed, landing silent as a cat. His sword became a silver ribbon in the oppressive heat, not cutting, but deflecting, binding, a pommel striking a wrist here, the flat of his blade slapping a cheek there. There were grunts, the clatter of dropped weapons. It was over before Leonotis could raise his branch again, the would-be ambushers groaning on the ground, clutching bruised limbs, their fight extinguished. Chinaka practically fell out of the cab, her hands shaking as she grabbed Leonotis, her fingers digging into his arms. "Are you hurt? Oh, spirits, are you hurt?" She spun him around, her eyes darting over him. "What in all the hells were you thinking?" The words were a torrent, relief and fury battling for dominance in her tone. Gethy's sword slid back into its sheath with a sigh of oiled leather. His brow furrowed as his gaze lingered on a torn shoe on one of the fallen men, the way another's ribs showed starkly beneath a threadbare shirt. "They have nothing, Chinaka," he said, his voice low. "Sticks and rusted iron. Look at their faces." He gestured with his chin. "Driven by an empty belly, not malice." A deep sigh escaped him, the lines around his eyes deepening. The road to the capital, it will not be so forgiving. Hours later, the gurgle of a narrow stream was the only sound accompanying the pop and hiss of their small fire. Chinaka, after a long, fear-fueled tirade about recklessness that had left Leonotis small and quiet, now stared into the flames, her jaw set. Gethy, too, had borne the brunt of her sharp-edged worry. Leonotis poked at an ember with a twig, the silence stretching taut between them. If those memories come back," he finally ventured, his voice barely above a whisper, his face turned away from the fire's glow. "My black ace. It might come back too, right?" He didn't look at either of them. "Then I wouldn't need this." He nudged the branch sword with his foot. Chinaka's breath hitched. She reached out, then hesitated, her hand hovering. That, yes, Leonotis, it could. A shiver traced her spine. The thought of that dark, volatile power returning to the boy beside her was a cold knot in her stomach. Later, the fire had burned low. Chinaka's breathing was a deep, even rhythm from her bedroll. Leonotis shifted, nudging Gethi, who sat apart, the faint scrape of leather against steel the only sign he was awake as he cleaned his blade. Gethi. The whisper was lost almost immediately in the night sounds. Before, when I had all my... Before... Did you like me then? Gethi's hand stilled. The firelight caught the planes of his face, leaving his eyes in shadow. He opened his mouth, then closed it, a muscle twitching in his jaw. I barely tolerate you now, he said, the jest falling flat, thin. He heard the hollowness in his own voice. It's possible, he managed, the word a dry leaf skittering away. Leonotis's shoulders slumped. His fingers twisted the edge of his blanket. My old diary. I found it. His voice was so low Gethi had to strain to hear. Under a floorboard, it didn't feel like mine when I read it. A small, choked sound escaped him. I don't like him. The one who wrote those things. He finally looked up, and the raw vulnerability in his eyes was a physical blow. I want to be good, Gethi. I'm scared if it all comes back. I won't be. I don't want to be that other boy. The fire crackled, spitting a spark into the sudden, heavy quiet. The stream murmured on, oblivious. Is my father? Is he still alive? Leonotis's voice was a fragile thread, woven with a desperate, childlike hope. Gethi stared into the flames, the image of a shadowed, monstrous tree creature tearing through the savannah flashing unwanted in his mind. He swallowed. Maybe, he said, the word a careful, measured offering, his gaze steadfastly on the fire. A crease appeared between Leonotis's brows, his eyes clouding with a pain that looked too old for his face. Chinaka said. Something dragged him away, big and dark. His small hands clenched, knuckles white. I want to be stronger, strong enough to find him, to save anyone. A tightness gripped Gethi's chest. He saw the boy's fierce, fragile hope, and it resonated with something old and buried within himself. He turned, offering a small, hesitant smile. Then stronger you will be, Leonotis. The words felt true. Tomorrow, another skill, more precision, less enthusiasm. He tapped the branch sword, and very little ace needed, a good place to start. The change in the boy was instant. His eyes widened, the shadows within them receding as a spark ignited. Really? A real sword skill? Yes, Gethi affirmed, a surprising warmth spreading through him. Now, sleep. It's a long road. Leonotis burrowed into his blanket, the newly shaped wooden sword clutched close. His breathing soon softened into the even cadence of sleep, a small smile lingering on his lips. Gethi watched him, the firelight playing over the boy's peaceful face. After a long moment, he reached for the branch sword lying beside Leonotis. His fingers, calloused and sure, traced the contours Gethi himself had carved. And there, at the very base of the leather-wrapped hilt, almost invisible against the dark wood, was a single, impossibly tiny leaf. It was a vibrant, tender green, its delicate edges unfurling as if reaching for the dying embers. A prickle ran up Gethi's arms. He turned the hilt over. He'd spent time shaping this, smoothing the rougher edges. He would have noticed, he was sure of it. He ran a thumb over the soft texture of the new growth. A sign, a fragile, stubborn thing, just like the boy beside him, pushing its way towards the light. Stillwater was a city caught between eras, a reluctant limb of the Liptus kingdom, straining against both tradition and decay. Nestled on the fringes of a wide saltwater estuary that once fed fleets of fisherfolk and river traders, it had grown haphazardly, more like coral than a city. The old kingdom of Liptus banners still hung in certain quarters, faded symbols of dynasties that had long since lost their grip. Yet, the city's soul remained stubbornly intact, one of rhythm, resilience, and wary silence. The truck clattered into the heart of Orisha, Stillwater's oldest district, where the cobbled streets twisted like scars between crumbling colonial facades and newer, slapdash concrete additions. Tin rooftops clinked under the heat. Electric wires dangled like garlands across narrow alleys. Chinaka eased the truck to a halt beside a group of street vendors, their stalls slumped under the weight of smoked catfish, woven baskets and bundles of bitter leaf. Women in faded ero and buba watched the travelers with guarded eyes as barefoot children darted past. A drumming circle echoed faintly in the distance, but it was muffled, like everything else in Stillwater, by the thick humidity and a creeping sense of time gone wrong. Leonotis stuck his head slightly out the window, his expression caught between intrigue and unease. There was color here, dyed fabrics drying on lines, murals of ancestral warriors, and the sharp scent of Afro-Rodo peppers wafting from a nearby chop shop. But there was also ruin. Buildings leaned against each other like weary elders. Nothing was straight, nothing was clean. The city felt both watched and forgotten, suspended in a lull between gods and governance. They passed an intersection marked by an ancient tree whose bark had been carved with Ifa symbols. At its base, a shrine cradled offerings, cola nuts, rusted coins, a cracked calabash bowl of gin. Gethi bowed his head as they passed it. Leonotis glanced at him, curious, but said nothing. And then, the orphanage. The building squatted behind a rusting iron gate, its bones colonial but exhausted. Time had sucked the life from its plastered skin, leaving behind streaks of mold and grime like war paint. The hand-painted sign overhead, Stillwater Orphanage, a home for hope, was crooked. The last word half-faded as though even hope had decided to leave early. Gethi's expression turned somber as he gazed at the building. "This is it," he said, his voice low. I grew up here. Back then, though, the administration was different. Old man Fuzo and his wife ran the place, stern but not unkind. They climbed out of the truck, the silence broken only by the distant cries of gulls. As they approached the heavy oak door, it creaked open, revealing a woman with sharp, angular features and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Her hair was pulled so tightly back into a bun that her forehead gleamed. Her wrapper was crisp, ankara of deep indigo, with the crest of a local civic faction stitched at the hem, a sign that she served some bureaucratic allegiance, though what kind was unclear. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice devoid of warmth. "We're looking for Director Fuzo," Gethi said, stepping forward. I used to be in his care." The woman's gaze narrowed. "Director Fuzo and his wife are no longer here. I am the acting director. My name is Maposa." "Oh," Gethi said, a flicker of concern in his eyes. "Where did they go?" "They had to go to the capital a few weeks back," Maposa said, her tone clipped, "to discuss funding with the king." Chinaka exchanged a worried glance with Gethi. A trip to the king for funding didn't sound like a short errand. "Right," Gethi said slowly. "Well, we have a young boy here, Leonotis. He needs a place to stay temporarily until we return from our own visit to the king." Maposa's gaze flickered to Leonotis, who stood clutching his small bag, looking lost and apprehensive. After a moment of consideration, she nodded curtly. "We have space. There'll be a fee." Gethi quickly produced a small pouch of coins. Maposa accepted it without a word. "How old are you, boy?" she asked Leonotis, her sharp eyes scrutinizing him. Leonotis opened his mouth to answer, then his eyes flickered to Gethy, a silent reminder passing between them. I just turned 10, he stammered, feeling a pang of guilt at the lie. Maposa's eyes narrowed, a flicker of shrewd assessment within them before she gave a curt nod. Follow me. She led them through a dimly lit hallway that smelled faintly of mildew and despair. She stopped at a door and pushed it open, revealing a large room filled with rows of narrow, wood-framed beds. A handful of boys, their faces pale and their clothes threadbare, stared at the newcomers with dull eyes. Chinaka and Gethy helped Leonotis carry his small bag to an empty bed in the corner. The thin mattress looked lumpy and uncomfortable. As they turned to leave, to say their goodbyes, Leonotis suddenly felt a prickling sensation on the back of his neck. He glanced towards the window and caught a fleeting glimpse of a face disappearing behind the tattered curtains. Gethy, noticing Leonotis's unease, followed his gaze. "Probably just one of the other kids, hiding," he said with a reassuring smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. They knelt down, one on either side of Leonotis. "Be brave, little one," Chinaka said, her voice softer than usual. "If everything goes well with the king, we'll be back to get you in about a month." A month felt like an eternity to Leonotis. He nodded, trying to appear braver than he felt. The director clapped her hands sharply. "Out to the yard, all of you. Chores await." She gestured for Leonotis to follow the other boys, her gaze already distant. The orphanage yard was a bleak, dusty patch of ground, enclosed by a high metal fence. The other boys moved with a weary resignation. One of them, a skinny boy with hollow eyes, approached Leonotis. "Welcome to hell," he said, his voice flat. "How old are you?" 12, Leonotis blurted out, the carefully rehearsed 10 completely forgotten in his nervousness. A flicker of something, hope, crossed the boy's gaunt face, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. 12, he repeated tonelessly. "Right. If you ever figure out a way to get out of this place, let me know. I've never been able to find one." In a shadowy corner of the yard, a young girl with wide, observant eyes watched their interaction. That night, Leonotis tossed and turned on his lumpy mattress. He drifted into a dream, a vivid image of a beautiful woman with long, flowing hair, but her face remained frustratingly out of focus. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice echoing in the dream. She simply smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "Come to me. We need your help," she whispered. Then, the scene shifted. The beautiful woman was gone, replaced by his father, his face contorted in pain, wrapped in thick black tree branches. His father's eyes glowed with an unnatural green light. "Help me, son," he rasped, his voice filled with terror. Leonotis woke with a gasp, the word "father" escaping his lips. He sat up, his heart pounding, but the details of the dream had already begun to slip away like water through his fingers. He lay back down, a vague sense of unease clinging to him, and eventually drifted back to sleep. The next day at the Stylewater orphanage was a brutal induction, not unlike an initiation rite, but without the ceremony, without the honor. In the kingdom of Liptus, there were rituals for crossing thresholds. A child's first steps, the first tooth, the first hunt, the first rain of the season. Each had its songs, its prayers, its presence of elders. But Leonotis's first day here came with no drums, no incantations, only grime, labor, and the suffocating scent of bleach and boiled yam. The sackcloth uniform scratched like punishment. Rough, woven from burlap or something close to it, it hung awkwardly on his small frame. It wasn't clothing, it was a statement. You belong to no one now. The seams rubbed raw against his underarms, and by midday, small welts had begun to form beneath his collarbone. The odor in the building was a sour mix. shea butter, stale egusi, wet floors, and the sharp chemical bite of lye soap that soaked everything: their clothes, their skin, their beds. Chores began at daybreak, when the akoko leaves outside the dorm rustled with the breeze and the cockerel crowed from the compound wall. They were marched out in rows, barefoot, into the yard where buckets were waiting. Slop buckets, heavy with rotting food and bathwater, were dumped into a pit behind the latrines. Leonotis, new and small, had to drag his alone. The Yoruba believed work built character, but here it felt like it was breaking him down instead, unmaking him. Let us labor by day so we do not see shame by night. That was the phrase the senior caretaker barked at them as they scrubbed the dorm floors with their bare hands. It was one of many proverbs that floated through the halls like scripture, wielded more like sticks than songs of wisdom. Leonotis scrubbed until his fingers wrinkled and burned, the soapy water stinging cuts he hadn't noticed. The sun blazed through the open slats of the windows, and sweat slid into his eyes. His arms ached with the rhythm of work, the oriki, or praise songs of his ancestors, now buried beneath grime and fatigue. When he finally laid down, the straw mattress scratching his cheek, his muscles screamed in protest. He closed his eyes, and for a fleeting moment, he felt the weight of a sword hilt, heard Gethi's low command: "Exercise every day, Leonotis. Practice the sword techniques with a pencil if you must." The memory was a cruel whisper in the face of his utter depletion. A pencil? He barely had the strength to lift his own hand. When they were finally given food, it came in a rusted tin bowl, watery stew, more liquid than substance, with a hint of spice and a few floating shreds of spinach. He sat alone on the edge of a concrete step, the bowl warming his numb hands. His stomach growled, but every swallow felt like chewing silence. That's when he saw her again, the girl from earlier in the yard. Her name, he had learned from a whispered correction during roll call, was Lo. She approached quietly, the hem of her white cotton dress brushing against the dusty floor. Unlike the other girls, she moved with a lightness, as if she knew how to tiptoe between trouble and attention. Her dreadlocks were striking, thick coils that faded from deep black at the roots to a radiant blonde, almost as if the sun had taken root in her hair. Her face was calm, open, with large brown eyes that seemed to listen more than look. She didn't ask permission to sit. She just did. Leonotis looked up warily. Lo didn't smile, but she offered a sliver of cassava root, pressed into his hand with a quiet, unceremonious grace. Sharing food in Lipta's tradition was not just kindness. It was trust, a sacred act of hospitality, a kinship gesture that defied rules and hierarchy. "You knew?" she asked softly, picking at her own bowl with practiced detachment. Leonotis nodded, too tired to form words. He took the cassava slowly, chewing without tasting. "They always push the new ones harder," she murmured, "to see if you'll break, like goat's skin on the talking drum. If it's too soft, it won't speak. Too tight, it snaps." She looked at him. Her eyes held something ancient, not pity, recognition. "You're not going to snap, I can tell." Leonotis didn't believe her, not yet. But her voice was the first thing all day that didn't hurt. "I saw you getting dropped off. Did your parents, did they die in the war?" she asked, her voice quiet. "No," Leonotis said, frowning. "What war?" A surprised silence fell over the small group of children huddled around the table. "You don't know about the war?" one of the older boys asked. He glanced around at the others, then back at Leonotis. "You mean, not at all?" Leonotis hesitated, wondering if he should mention his amnesia, but the thought felt too complicated to explain. Lo's expression was somber. "My parents were sent to explore the dark forest by the old king," she said, her voice barely a whisper. They never came back. Then my older brother was called up, and so I ended up here. My mother was attacked by a tree creature, Leonotis said, and my father, he was kidnapped by it. Lo looked surprised. Plant monsters are from the dark forest, and they don't usually come this far south. Your father, he's probably gone too. No, Leonotis said fiercely, a stubborn hope rising within him. He's alive, I know it, and I'm going to rescue him as soon as Chinaka and Gethi come back from visiting the king. The other children exchanged knowing glances. If the king called them, one of the older girls said with a bitter laugh, they aren't coming back. A cold dread washed over Leonotis. He looked at the faces around him, each one etched with a quiet despair. He realized then that every one of them had a guardian, a parent, someone who had been called to serve the king and never returned. A knot of worry tightened in his stomach for Chinaka and Gethi. Why hadn't they mentioned how dangerous the king seemed? Don't try to leave on your own, Lo said quietly, her eyes filled with a grim understanding. The ones who try to leave, they never come back the same. The next morning, as Leonotis was scrubbing the grimy floor of the dining hall, the hulking caretaker, a man with a permanent scowl, stopped beside him. Heard you're actually 12 years old, boy. Leonotis's heart leaped into his throat. He'd only told one person that, the skinny boy from the first night. He glanced around the room, but the boy wasn't among the other children. He hadn't seen him since that first evening. Later, he found Lo tending a small patch of wilting flowers in the otherwise barren yard. Lo, he said urgently, the caretaker knows I'm 12. How? Lo looked surprised. Then a shadow crossed her face. That boy, the one you were talking to the first night. Don't trust him. He's been here since I arrived 3 years ago. He should have been sent to the war when he turned 13, since he was never adopted, but he's still here. He's odd. But did he tell the caretaker my real age? Leonotis asked, confused and a little scared. Lo shrugged. Maybe they just guessed. Or maybe he tells them things, she said. I'm 12 too. I'll be of age soon. Will you have to go to the war? Leonotis asked. Lo gave a harsh, humorless laugh. Women aren't allowed in the army. The orphanage will just sell me off to the highest bidder, married off to some farmer's son who can't find a wife any other way. Her eyes hardened. The same will happen to you now that they know you're 12. Once they figure out if you have any A's attributes, you'll be sold to some wealthy family to breed more little A's bearers. Gethi and Chinaka will be back for me before that could happen. Are they telling the king good news or bad news? Lo said, her hands on her hips. Well, it isn't good news, but I was already tested, Leonotis said, a desperate hope flickering within him. I don't have any magic. Lo's expression turned even grimmer. Then you're in an even worse position. They'll probably just send you straight to the war. No one wants a non-Ace-born 12-year-old boy for breeding. She looked around the yard, her eyes darting nervously. Listen, Leonotis. I can't stay here. I won't let them sell me off. The way out. I think I know a way. If you want to come with me, we can leave together. Leonotis was jolted awake by a gentle hand shaking his shoulder. Lo's face, usually hardened with a weary resignation, was now alight with a nervous energy. Leonotis, she whispered urgently, her voice barely audible above the soft snores of the other boys. For the auction, are you absolutely sure you're going to tell that ogre of a director your birthday is tomorrow? Leonotis, still groggy, nodded firmly. Yes, 13 tomorrow. A small, rebellious thrill flickered within him at the thought of this new deception. Lo's grip tightened on his arm. Good. When they come for you, to take you to the auction area, I'll follow. It's supposed to be down in the old sewer system. We'll make our escape then, after I create a distraction. I managed to acquire some tools. She reached into the folds of her threadbare dress and produced two crudely sharpened metal forks, their tines honed to points. Are you sure you don't want one? Leonotis shook his head, reaching under his thin mattress. He pulled out the sturdy root he'd found by the gnarled tree in the yard, its shape surprisingly sword-like. I have this. Lo eyed the stick with a mixture of skepticism and reluctant admiration. All right then, be careful with that. It's almost midnight. I need to go before they notice I'm gone. She squeezed his arm again. Be ready. With a final furtive glance around the darkened room, she slipped away. Leonotis lay back down, his heart pounding with a mixture of fear and anticipation. Sleep eventually claimed him, and he dreamt of a massive, vibrant garden, unlike anything he'd ever seen in the dusty orphanage. A winding path led towards a dark, mysterious cave nestled at the foot of a towering ancient tree. The next day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Leonotis and Lo went to the dreary orphanage yard after their perfunctory chores. Lo, her eyes sharp and focused, explained that she'd seen the male caregiver practicing with throwing knives when he thought no one was watching. So, while Leonotis practiced dodging and blocking imaginary blows with his stick, Lo diligently hurled rocks at a cracked wooden fence, her aim improving with each throw. When her aim was sharp enough, she threw them at Leonotis, who blocked and dodged them easily. That stick, Lo said, pausing in her throwing practice, her gaze fixed on Leonotis's makeshift sword. It really does look like a proper blade. Where did you find it? Just by the big tree, Leonotis replied. He couldn't shake the feeling that the stick was somehow stronger than the last one he found, as if he could sense power radiating from it. That night, as the meager dinner of watery soup was being served, the director, her sharp eyes glinting in the dim light, approached Leonotis. Tonight you'll be having dinner at a special place, she said, her tone devoid of any warmth. Two burly figures flanked her. They blindfolded him roughly and led him away, the rough fabric digging into his eyes. Leonotis found himself standing on a makeshift stage, the rough wooden planks cold beneath his bare feet. The only real source of light in the cavernous room was a large, smooth stone pedestal in front of him, the attribute stone, glowing with a soft, internal luminescence. Dim torches flickered around the perimeter, casting long, dancing shadows that obscured the faces of the small crowd gathered in the darkness. The director stood beside him, her voice oily as she addressed the unseen audience. She described his remarkable work ethic, his unquestioning obedience, and the untapped potential she was sure he possessed. Then she turned to Leonotis, her gaze cold and intimidating. "Touch the stone, boy." Leonotis's heart hammered in his chest. He tried to scan the shadowy crowd for any sign of Lo, any hint of an escape route, but the darkness swallowed everything. "Come on," the director hissed, her hand gripping his arm tightly. With a trembling hand, Leonotis reached out and placed his palm on the smooth, cool surface of the attribute stone. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a dark stain began to spread across the stone beneath his hand, like ink bleeding into water. Leonotis's heart sank. My black ace, it's coming back. But then, the blackness began to swirl, and a vibrant deep green started to emerge from within it, pushing back the darkness until the stone pulsed with a swirling vortex of emerald light. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. The director's jaw dropped in shock. Murmurs erupted from the shadows, followed by excited shouts. Numbers, each one higher than the last, echoed through the cavern as people began to surge forward, their shadowy figures scrambling over each other. "Get back!" the director shrieked, her authority crumbling. Leonotis stood frozen and utterly confused. Green was better than black, he supposed, but what did it even mean? Just then, a figure leaped from the shadows, throwing a cloud of white powder into the air, a makeshift smoke bomb made of flour. Lo, coughing erupted from the crowd as the flour filled the air. Lo grabbed Leonotis' hand, her grip surprisingly strong, and pulled him off the stage. They plunged through a doorway in the confusion, the shouts and scrambling figures fading behind them. After what felt like an eternity of running through damp, echoing tunnels, the stench of sewage filling their lungs, they finally stopped to catch their breath. I think we lost them, Lo gasped, leaning against a slimy brick wall. She turned to Leonotis, her brow furrowed. I thought you said you didn't have any ace. They tested you before, right? Leonotis shook his head, still trying to process the swirling green light. They did. Nothing happened. Well, obviously you have a green attribute, Lo said, her voice hushed. Quiet. There are rat monsters down here. We can finish this conversation later. My sword, Leonotis exclaimed, suddenly remembering his stick. He hadn't had a chance to grab it before the director's goons grabbed him. They crept forward, Lo leading the way through the labyrinthine tunnels. They reached a small alcove where Lo had hidden their clothes and supplies. Leonotis saw his root sword, wrapped in a piece of scavenged cloth, leaning against the bag. A large, grotesque rat with glowing red eyes was gnawing at the edge of the bag. Lo hissed and threw a sharp rock, scaring it away. Leonotis picked up his root sword, relief flooding him that Lo had brought it. There's food in the bag, she explained. If one rat smelled it already, more will be coming soon. He shed the rough orphanage uniform, the coarse fabric of familiar discomfort. Pulling on his own shirt and shorts felt like a reclaiming of himself. A genuine smile touched his lips as the simple clasp of his green warrior toga settled onto his shoulder. It wasn't armor or fine silks, just plain cloth, but wearing it felt like shrugging off a heavy cloak. He settled his hand on his hip, the gesture feeling natural, confident. Across the sewer, Lo had also changed out of the usual drab uniform and now wore a plain white tank top stark against faded red shorts. Where did you get your clothes? Leonotis couldn't help but ask, the question escaping before he fully considered it. Lo's reply was immediate and flat. None of your business. Just as she said it, two monstrous growls could be heard from the darkness. Two pairs of glowing red eyes emerged from the gloom, followed by the hulking shapes of the rat monsters. They were easily the size of dogs, their fur matted and bristling, their teeth long and yellowed, dripping with some unspeakable slime. They sniffed the air, their whiskered snouts twitching, fixated on Leonotis and Lo. Lo reacted instantly. Her hand darted to a small pouch tied at her waist, and two smooth fist-sized stones appeared as if by magic. With a grunt, she hurled the first stone. It whistled through the air and slammed into the side of the nearest rat's head with a sickening thud. The creature staggered, a high-pitched squeal of pain ripping from its throat, but it didn't go down. Before the first rat could recover, Lo launched the second stone. This one caught the other rat squarely in the snout. The impact made its head snap back, and it stumbled, momentarily disoriented. "Leonotis, now!" Lo yelled, her voice echoing off the damp brick walls. Leonotis, clutching his root sword, moved with an agility he hadn't known he possessed. The root, gnarled and surprisingly dense, felt strangely natural in his hand. The first rat, its eyes blazing with fury, lunged at him, snapping its massive jaws. Leonotis sidestepped the attack, the rat's foul breath washing over him and brought the root down in a swift arc. The impact against the rat's thick skull was solid, a dull thwack that made his arms vibrate. The rat shrieked again, a more enraged sound this time, and swiped a clawed paw at Leonotis. He barely managed to duck, the razor-sharp claws tearing through the air where his head had been moments before. He danced back, keeping the length of the route between himself and the creature. Meanwhile, Lo was scrambling for more stones. The second rat had recovered and was now advancing on her, its teeth bared in a menacing snarl. It moved with a surprising speed for its size, its claws scrabbling on the uneven ground. Leonotis saw Lo was in danger. He feinted towards the first rat, drawing its attention, then spun and charged towards the second. He thrust the pointed end of the root towards the rat's chest. The creature, caught off guard by his sudden change in direction, didn't have time to react. The sharp tip of the root pierced its matted fur and sank into its flesh with a wet, tearing sound. The rat let out a choked squeal, its powerful body convulsing. It thrashed wildly, its claws raking against the stone floor before collapsing in a heap. The first rat, seeing its companion fall, turned its full fury on Leonotis. It charged, a low growl rumbling in its chest. Leonotis stood his ground, his grip tightening on the root. He waited until the last possible moment, then dodged to the side as the rat lunged. He swung the root again, aiming for its exposed flank. The impact was heavy, and the rat stumbled sideways, its breath coming in ragged gasps. Before it could recover, Lo, now armed with another stone, hurled it with all her might. The stone struck the rat behind the ear, and this time the creature's legs buckled. It let out a final, shuddering squeak and fell silent. Leonotis and Lo stood panting in the dim light, the stench of the dead rats filling the air. Leonotis's heart hammered in his chest, and his hands trembled slightly. He looked at the root in his hand, a strange mix of fear and exhilaration coursing through him. He had fought, and he had won. Lo, her face pale but resolute, nodded grimly at the fallen creatures. "Good. They won't bother us anymore. Let's keep moving." She glanced at Leonotis, a flicker of respect in her eyes. That stick of yours is more useful than it looks." "I was late getting to the auction," Lo explained, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "I had to scout our escape route from the city through this sewer maze first." As they were about to move on, a heavily built figure in dark leather armor appeared at the end of the tunnel, a drawn sword glinting in the dim light. One of the director's bodyguards. A brief, desperate scuffle ensued. Leonotis, reacting instinctively, swung his root sword in the same simple arc Gethy had shown him. But this time, as the stick connected with the bodyguard's arm, a network of thick, thorny roots erupted from the damp stone floor, ensnaring the man's legs and arms. He roared in surprise and struggled against the sudden binding vegetation. Lo stared at Leonotis, her mouth agape. How did you do that?" Leonotis stared at the writhing roots, his own shock mirroring hers. I don't know." "We need to go," Lo yelled, grabbing his arm again. They fled down the tunnel, the bodyguard's frustrated shouts echoing behind them, until they stumbled out of a large sewer pipe and plunged into the cold, rushing water of a river. Back in the sewer tunnel, the director reached the edge of the pipe, her face contorted in fury as she watched Leonotis and Lo being swept away by the current. "We can't let him get away," she snarled. "A green Aesborn. He's worth a fortune." The river's current was a relentless beast, tossing Leonotis and Lo like ragdolls. A cluster of tangled branches, almost a makeshift raft, offered a precarious hold but was rapidly disintegrating as the river current quickened. Leonotis gripped his root sword tightly, but a rogue wave slammed into him, and the weapon was wrenched from his grasp, swallowed by the churning water. "My sword!" he cried out, watching it disappear downstream. Just as the roar of a waterfall grew deafening and the two spun violently towards the precipice, the water around them began to behave strangely. It slowed, then shuddered, and finally stilled completely, as if an invisible hand had pressed pause on the river itself. Leonotis and Lo found themselves suspended in the motionless water, mere feet from the cascading drop. They instinctively paddled towards the nearest bank, the unnatural silence amplifying their frantic movements. As they reached the muddy shore and collapsed, gasping for breath, they saw the source of the aquatic miracle. A young girl stood waist-deep in the stilled water, her arms outstretched, her expression one of immense concentration. "Thank you," Lo said, her voice hoarse. "You saved us." "You're welcome," the girl replied, her voice barely a whisper, her blue eyes shimmering with unshed tears. Lo, ever practical, was about to suggest they move on, but the sheer power the girl had just displayed made her pause. To stop a river, right before a waterfall, it was an astonishing feat of magic. "What are you doing out here?" Lo asked, her usual suspicion tinged with awe. "In the middle of the night. What is your name?" "My name is Jacqueline." "What are you doing out here by yourself?" Leonotis asked. I just escaped some bandits," Jacqueline said, her voice trembling slightly. They were awful. I'm on my way north." "Then we can travel together," Lo said, a flicker of relief in her eyes. "There's safety in numbers, especially if bandits already came after you. We can stay in the forest to hide more easily. With any luck, they'll think we fell off the waterfall." "Okay," Jacqueline said. Leonotis suddenly felt a tickling sensation against his skin. He reached inside his damp clothes and pulled out a small purple fish still wriggling. "Hey, look! Dinner!" he exclaimed, a rare smile gracing his lips. Before he could even consider cooking it, Lo's hand shot out, slapping the fish out of his grasp. It flopped onto the muddy bank, then she kicked it back into the water with surprising force. "What was that for?" Leonotis asked, bewildered. Lo and Jacqueline exchanged dumbfounded glances. "River fish," Lo said, her voice incredulous. "Most of them around here are poisonous, and this river itself isn't good to be in for too long." Jacqueline nodded in agreement. "It carries things, unpleasant things." The memory of her escape seemed to cloud her features again. As they began to walk along the riverbank, Leonotis found himself falling into a familiar role. He initially walked slightly ahead, his senses on alert, scanning their surroundings. "I'm like Gethy now," he thought with a surge of pride, protecting people. Then, deciding they needed someone to watch their backs, he dropped into the rearguard position. He glanced back at Lo and Jacqueline, a sense of responsibility settling over him. His gaze drifted down, and he noticed a strange marking on Lo's lower back, just visible above the hem of her tattered red shorts. Some kind of birthmark, he thought. "Is that a birthmark on your back?" Leonotis asked, pointing. Lo's head snapped around, her eyes flashing with anger. "Stop looking at my butt, you little sneak." Leonotis's face flushed crimson. "Sorry, I didn't mean to." He mumbled an embarrassed apology and quickly averted his gaze. They eventually found a small clearing to make camp. "I'll take the first watch," Leonotis offered, wanting to prove his worth. Lo snorted, unimpressed. "Just don't do anything stupid while we're sleeping, all right?" As he sat by the small fire, the image of his lost root sword flickered in his mind. He doubted he'd ever find another one like it. Then, his gaze fell upon a tangled mess of roots near the edge of the clearing. On a whim, he tugged at one of the thicker strands. It came free easily. He pulled again, and to his astonishment, he unearthed another root, this one even straighter and sturdier than the last, with a natural curve that formed a perfect hilt. A surge of excitement coursed through him. He stood up and began to practice the simple sword swings Gethy had taught him, the new root sword feeling surprisingly balanced in his hand. He felt a prickling sensation, the feeling of being watched. He froze, his hand tightening on the hilt, and peered into the dense bushes bordering the clearing. A pair of eyes, glowing faintly in the darkness, stared back at him. "Lo, Jacqueline!" Leonotis stumbled backward, his voice cracking with alarm. But they were already upon them. 4 rough-looking men, their faces hardened and cruel, emerged from the surrounding trees. They brandished rusty swords and wicked-looking knives. "All right, brats," one of them sneered, his eyes glinting in the firelight. "Give it up. Anything of value." Leonotis knew these weren't just hungry villagers. These were real bandits, the kind who wouldn't hesitate to kill them even after they surrendered. His mind raced. He remembered a complex 10-strike technique Gethi used to practice alone by the clinic, a fluid dance of parries and thrusts. He hadn't been formally taught it, but he had watched, memorized, and practiced the movements in secret. He gripped his new root sword, took a deep breath, and charged. He moved faster than he thought possible, his body remembering the sequence. He knocked out the first bandit with 3 swift blows to the head before the man even registered his approach. The second bandit lunged with a knife, but Leonotis parried the attack with the root sword, the impact jarring his arm. The next 4 strikes flowed seamlessly, a whirlwind of motion, and the second bandit crumpled to the ground with a sharp gasp, clutching his gut. Now the other 2 bandits were on him, and Leonotis knew his memorized sequence only had 2 strikes left. Lo, meanwhile, had scrambled to gather her rocks. Just as the largest bandit moved in for the kill, Lo hurled a stone. It struck the bandit in the back of the head, throwing him off balance. Leonotis seized the opportunity, thrusting his root sword towards the bandit's chest, the hard wood connecting solidly and sending the man sprawling with a grunt of pain. He then swung down with all his might, the heavy root connecting with the man's shoulder, further incapacitating him. The last bandit stared at his fallen comrades, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Unbelievable," he muttered. He drew a throwing knife and flung it at Leonotis. Leonotis dodged the knife, but a second one was already hurtling towards him. Just as it was about to strike, a rock slammed into the knife, deflecting it, but not enough. The knife struck Leonotis's shoulder, a searing pain shooting through him. "Ah!" he cried out, but he still stood his ground, his root sword held defensively. The last bandit, realizing he was outnumbered and outmatched, decided to cut his losses. "You haven't seen the last of me, brats," he snarled before disappearing into the darkness. Jacqueline rushed to Leonotis, who had fallen to his knees, clutching his bleeding shoulder. She gently pulled the knife out. "Ah!" Leonotis yelled again, the pain sharp and immediate. After a quick examination, Jacqueline's brow furrowed with concern, but she seemed to find some relief. She placed her hands over the wound, said a few magic words, and the water in her canteen began to glow with a soft, ethereal light. She poured the glowing water over Leonotis's shoulder. It was strong, healing magic. The bleeding immediately slowed, and a small scar was all that was left. "Thank you," Leonotis said, surprised this young girl's magic seemed stronger than Chinaka's. Jacqueline looked at him, and then at Lo, her blue eyes wide with admiration. "You two, you're amazing fighters. My friends were..." She trailed off, her voice catching. Lo, ever practical, was already stripping the fallen bandits of anything useful. She gathered a few coins, some rough blankets, and a map of the area. "We've got supplies for the road now," she said, her voice matter-of-fact. Leonotis looked at the still bodies. "Are they dead?" Lo shook her head. "No, just very much out of the fight, which is why we need to move. Now." The moon dappled through the leaves as they walked, the initial tension of their near-death experience with the bandits having eased into a weary camaraderie. A comfortable silence stretched between them for a while, broken only by the rustling of leaves underfoot and the distant chirping of unseen insects. Then Leonotis, squinting up at the towering trees, broke the quiet. "So, where exactly are you two headed?" he asked, a genuine curiosity in his voice. Lo, ever practical, kept her gaze fixed on the path ahead, her hand resting on her pouch of rocks. "Well, I'm going to the capital." She stated it as a simple fact, the determination in her voice leaving little room for argument. Leonotis blinked, a flicker of recognition sparking in his eyes. "The capital? That's where I'm going to. Gethi and Chinaka, they went there to see the king." A knot of worry tightened in his chest. He needed to know they were all right. "Yeah, I think I need to go to the capital too, to make sure they're okay." Jacqueline, who had been walking silently beside them, her gaze often drifting towards the distant mist-shrouded peaks, finally spoke, her voice soft but firm. "My path lies elsewhere. I must go to the Orisha mountain shrine." She tilted her head, her blue eyes holding a distant, almost ethereal quality. Lo stopped abruptly, turning to face Jacqueline with a skeptical frown. "An Orisha shrine up in those mountains? I've never heard of a shrine up there." Jacqueline's lips curved into a small smile. "You may be surprised, Lo, but it's there, and it is important, for reasons I cannot fully explain." She glanced at Leonotis, then back at the looming mountains. "It is a journey I must undertake." Leonotis, caught between Lo's pragmatic skepticism and Jacqueline's mysterious conviction, felt a bit lost himself. "So, the capital for me, and the capital for Lo, and a water mountain shrine for you." He gestured vaguely, trying to piece together their disparate destinations. "That's not exactly straightforward." He amended his earlier thought of convenient. Lo snorted, resuming her walk. "About as straightforward as finding a spider in your bedroll." She eyed Jacqueline with a hint of suspicion that was quickly becoming her default expression when dealing with the serene girl. "What's so special about this water mountain shrine anyway? Is there some kind of magical fish market up there, or a secret spring that grants wishes?" Jacqueline smiled softly, a hint of sadness in it this time. "Nothing quite so mundane, nor perhaps so immediately rewarding. It holds something essential, something I need to restore." Her gaze drifted to the distant peaks again, as if she could see the shrine itself. Lo still looked unconvinced, kicking at a loose stone. "Essential how? Like, essential for you, or essential for the whole world? Because if it's the latter, maybe we should all be heading for this magic mountain." Her tone was dry, but a sliver of genuine, if grudging, curiosity peeked through. Jacqueline merely shook her head, her enigmatic smile unwavering. "It is a personal matter for now, but thank you for your directness, Lo." Leonotis jumped in, sensing Lo might press further and not wanting their fragile alliance to shatter. "Right. Well, personal matters are personal, like my personal matter of wanting to find my friends and make sure they haven't been turned into royal paperweights by this king everyone seems so nervous about." He tried for a light tone, but the worry for Gethi and Chinaka was a real ache. Despite his own pressing need to find them, he felt a strange sense of loyalty forming towards these two unlikely companions. "Well," he said, more seriously now, "maybe we can stick together until our paths absolutely have to diverge. The world's a surprisingly small place sometimes, or so I've vaguely heard." He shrugged, a gesture he'd picked up from Gethi. "Besides, who knows what kind of trouble we'd all get into on our own." He looked from Lo's wary expression to Jacqueline's distant one. He remembered Gethi's lessons on the strength of a well-knit shield wall versus a lone spear. Lo grumbled under her breath, but didn't outright refuse. 3 targets might be better than 1, or just 3 times as clumsy. Depends on the trouble and who's causing it. She shot a pointed look at Leonotis, then a softer, appraising one at Jacqueline. You can stop a river, that's not nothing. And you, she added, glancing at Leonotis, you swing that stick like you mean it. Jacqueline inclined her head towards Lo. And you are resourceful, Lo. Your instincts are sharp. A faint, genuine smile touched her lips as she looked at Leonotis. And Leonotis is surprisingly resilient, and his heart is in the right place. Leonotis felt a warmth spread in his chest at Jacqueline's words, a small seed of confidence taking root. He was still just a boy with a root for a sword, but maybe, just maybe, he was becoming something more to these new, unexpected friends. Come on, it's getting really late and I'm tired. Let's hurry and find somewhere to camp, Leonotis said, the earlier attempt at lightness now replaced by a genuine weariness. The moon was climbing higher, casting long, dancing shadows that made every rustle in the undergrowth sound like a lurking threat. Lo nodded, the practical need for rest overriding her skepticism for the moment. He's right. Arguing about mystical mountains won't keep the night creatures away, or fill our bellies. Lead on then, Captain Leonotis, she said, with a trace of her usual sarcasm, but it lacked its usual bite, softened perhaps by shared danger and the moonlit path. They pushed on for another half hour, the forest growing denser, the air cooling against their skin. Finally, Jacqueline, whose quiet gaze seemed to notice things the others missed, pointed to a small, sheltered alcove formed by a tumble of moss-covered boulders near a stream whose quiet murmur promised fresh water. This will do, she said softly. It offers some cover, and the sound of the water will mask our own. They set about making a rudimentary camp, the shared tasks, gathering dry leaves for bedding, finding fallen branches for a small, smokeless fire that Lo expertly coaxed to life, creating a temporary truce between their diverging plans and personalities. Leonotis found a patch of berries that looked identical to ones Gethy had once shown him were safe, and Lo confirmed it with a nod. The weariness was a heavy cloak on all of them, but as Leonotis watched Lo arrange their meager supplies and Jacqueline hum a soft, almost inaudible tune, while she cleaned a few broad leaves to use as plates, he felt a fragile sense of belonging, a small flicker of hope in the vast, dark woods. King Rhaegar IV sat hunched over a stack of grim dispatches, the flickering light bulb casting long, skeletal shadows across the throne room. Commander Vihan, a man whose face seemed permanently etched with the weariness of a losing war, stood stiffly beside him, pointing his finger at a particularly bloody tally. As you can see, Your Majesty, the losses at the Crimson Pass were substantial. Another 500 gone, and the northern tribes show no signs of relenting. Valerius's voice was flat, the tone of a man reciting an unpleasant truth he'd delivered countless times. Rhaegar tossed the parchment onto the table, the sound echoing in the vast chamber. 500 more. For what? Because my father, in his infinite wisdom, decided that free ace training for the general populace was a drain on the royal coffers. Now we have a generation of soldiers who can barely conjure a decent shield spell. Why exactly are we even fighting this bloody war, Vihan? Vihan shifted uncomfortably. It was your father's will, Your Majesty. Rhaegar fixed the commander with a look that could have frozen magma. He debated, for a fleeting, dangerous moment, whether the man's staunch loyalty to a dead tyrant outweighed his usefulness. Before he could voice the dark thought, a nervous shuffling at the entrance of the throne hall drew his attention. A young servant, eyes wide with apprehension, stood just inside the massive oak doors. "We're busy," Rhaegar snapped, already reaching for one of the sleek, dark handguns holstered at his hip. "Go before I use you for target practice." "Sir, I have urgent news," the servant stammered, his gaze darting between Rhaegar's menacing weapon and the imposing figure of the commander. Rhaegar sighed, the air leaving his lungs in a frustrated gust. Fine, go ahead. But if I deem this some trivial palace gossip, I'm shooting off one of your ears. Out with it. He leveled the handgun, the faint hum of contained light magic barely audible. The servant swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. There are multiple reports, Your Majesty, of a child with a green ace affinity, sir. Commander Vihan's eyes widened in disbelief. Impossible, they are extinct. Are they not? Rhaegar echoed, his finger still resting lightly on the trigger. The reports, are they credible? Yes, very credible. Several nobles witnessed the attribute stone turn green themselves, sir, the servant said, his voice trembling slightly. The last confirmed sighting was over 2 decades ago. Yeah, okay, Rhaegar said, already losing interest and subtly adjusting his aim. So what? A rare ace-born child. What does this have to do with me or the war effort? Well, your father, he made it of the utmost importance to inform him immediately if one was ever found, sir, the servant said nervously, his eyes pleading. He authorized an award of 2,000 gold coins for just information leading to finding one. 20,000 for anyone who brought one in alive. Rhaegar's hand stilled. 20,000 gold coins was a king's ransom. 20,000? Why? Why would we offer such a ludicrous sum? Why exactly do we need a green Aesborn? The servant could only shrug helplessly, his face a mask of terror, certain he was about to become intimately acquainted with the king's firearm. Go, Rhaegar said abruptly, waving his gun dismissively. He hadn't actually intended to shoot the poor fool, but the surge of frustration was potent enough to make him reconsider if the servant lingered. Just get out of my sight. My father was a damn fool, Rhaegar thought darkly. I should have put him down ages ago. Commander Vihan stood silently, his usual military stoicism wavering slightly. Sir, did you want me to continue my report on the disastrous troop deployments? Rhaegar sank back onto his throne, the weight of his kingdom, his father's legacy of madness, and the baffling news of an Aesborn child crushing him. Proceed, Vihan, he said, the defeat heavy in his voice. Proceed with the litany of our failures. Rhaegar leaned back in his carved chair, fingers steepled, his gaze fixed on a point beyond his commander. Vihan had been speaking for the better part of an hour, his voice a low drone recounting the latest series of setbacks on the northern border. Each word seemed to add another layer to the oppressive weight in the room. And the trade delegation from Dakara refuses to proceed, my king, Vihan was saying, his tone carefully neutral, though the slump of his shoulders betrayed his discouragement. They cited unholy abominations near the Blackwood Pass. Apparently, a single well-aimed fire arrow from a nervous guard caused an entire unit to ignite like kindling. Rhaegar's mind, already sifting through the tedious list of Vihan's reported failures, drifted to Njiru. Ah, Njiru, his ambitious master necromancer and his much-vaunted army of the undead. A faint, humorless smile touched Rhaegar's lips. What grand pronouncements Njiru had made. An unstoppable legion, impervious to fear and pain. The ultimate weapon to solidify Rhaegar's dominion over Liptus and its fractious territories. The reality, Rhaegar mused, had been far less glorious. His undead soldiers, it turned out, were indeed impervious to fear, but spectacularly vulnerable to almost everything else. They were initially an impressive terror tactic against superstitious peasants or soldiers, yes, but laughably ineffective against anyone who knew even the most rudimentary fire or holy spells. A child with a blessed slingshot or a farmer with a pitchfork and a torch could, and often did, reduce Njiru's invincible warriors to piles of smouldering bones or sanctified dust. Rhaegar recalled early reports with a grimace. Entire platoons of the dead dissolving under a single cleric's chanted prayer or scattering in flaming disarray when confronted by a determined village militia brandishing burning branches. The cost in resources to raise them, only to see them so easily dispatched, had been galling. A waste of perfectly good corpses, Rhaegar had initially thought. But he was nothing if not pragmatic. If they couldn't fight, perhaps they could work. And so, Njiru's necromantic efforts and the tireless bodies they produced were now primarily used to bolster the kingdom's labor force. The undead were currently serving in the iron mines of the Dragon's Tooth Mountains and felling ancient trees in the vast, untamed Whisperwood. No need for food or rest or wages. No complaints about the crushing darkness or the back-breaking labor. In that, at least, they were proving their worth, outperforming any living worker in sheer, unceasing output. He had even, in a moment of what he now considered naive optimism, attempted to deploy them in the expansive farmlands along the serene river. The reaction had been predictable. The people of Liptus, while grudgingly tolerating the dead toiling deep beneath the earth or in distant, unpopulated forests, drew the line at skeletal hands harvesting their yams or withered fingers tending their cassava. Whispers of tainted crops and blighted earth had quickly escalated to furious delegations at the palace gates, to burning effigies of the Bone King, him, and thinly veiled threats of open revolt from the powerful farming guilds. Having the undead touch their food, it seemed, was an offense even his most loyal subjects could not stomach. Riots would have been an understatement. So, mining and logging it was. Njiru's once feared undead legion, Rhaegar reflected, as Vihan finally wound down his dismal report, were far more useful to him as tireless, mindless workers than they ever had been as soldiers. He wondered idly if Njiru felt the sting of that irony, his grand creations reduced to little more than ace animated tools. Probably not. The necromancer was too engrossed in his dark arts, too convinced of his own indispensable power. And perhaps, Rhaegar conceded, he was indispensable in his own peculiar way. The mines had never been so productive. He waved a dismissive hand, cutting off Vihan's concluding remarks. Enough, Vihan. The undead will continue their civic duties. Send word to the Dakara delegation that the Blackwood Pass will be cleared by living patrols, and double the guard on the grain shipments. The living, at least, have the sense to fear fire. The scent of blooming jasmine and damp earth clung to Leonotis as he drifted in the embrace of sleep. He found himself on a winding garden path paved with smooth, moss-covered stones. It beckoned him forward, the air alive with the gentle hum of unseen insects. At the path's end stood an ancient tree, its gnarled branches reaching towards the sky like the arms of a slumbering giant. A dark opening yawned at its base, a cave promising secrets. Drawn by an unseen force, Leonotis stepped into the cool darkness. In the heart of the cavern, bathed in a soft ethereal glow that seemed to emanate from the very stone, stood the woman from his recurring dreams. "Hello, Leonotis," her voice echoed, a melody both familiar and otherworldly. "I'm waiting for you." This time the hazy veil that had obscured her features lifted. Recognition struck Leonotis with the force of a physical blow. He had an unusual feeling that he should recognize her. "Who are you?" The words escaped his lips, a hesitant whisper. A warm, radiant smile bloomed on her face, chasing away the shadows in the cave. "You can finally hear my voice. I am glad, my child. I am waiting for you. Come find me. I need your help." Then, from behind her, a figure stepped forward. His shoulders were broad, his stance a little uncertain. Leonotis's breath hitched. It was him, his father. He placed a hand, a gesture both tender and hesitant, on the woman's shoulder. "How are you, son?" he asked, his voice thick with an emotion Leonotis couldn't quite decipher. Leonotis jolted awake, the lingering scent of jasmine fading into the stale air of their makeshift camp. Every detail of the dream remained etched in his mind, vivid and unsettling. Was it merely a trick of his sleeping mind, or something more? The woman. Her silhouette was undeniably familiar, yet there was a subtle difference, an ethereal quality that defied reality. A soft sniffle drew his attention. He turned to see Jacqueline curled on her side, tears silently tracing paths down her cheeks. In her hands, clutched tightly as if they were precious relics, were a pair of cracked spectacles, their lenses fractured like shattered memories. Leonotis instinctively reached out to wake her, but Lo, ever vigilant, placed a hand on his arm, shaking her head gently. Their eyes met, a silent understanding passing between them. Whatever had befallen Jacqueline before their paths intertwined had left deep scars. Those broken glasses were a tangible piece of that unknown tragedy. Lo was right, they were strangers still. Trust and the willingness to share such pain would take time. The quiet rustle of their preparations for breakfast filled the morning air. Leonotis kept his back to Jacqueline as she stirred, pretending not to notice the furtive swipe of her hand across her eyes. "What's for breakfast?" she asked, her voice a little rough, attempting a normalcy that didn't quite reach her eyes. The forest floor was a tapestry of greens and browns, and Leonotis, his stomach rumbling a quiet complaint, scanned the undergrowth with a hopeful eye. He spotted a patch of familiar-looking bushes, their branches dotted with tiny, dark specks. "Berries," he announced, starting towards them. Lo didn't even glance over. "Don't bother, Leonotis," she said, her voice flat with the weariness of their journey. "Those are buffalo thorns. They're always tiny, barely a mouthful for a bird, let alone 3 hungry travelers. And don't get me started on the taste." Leonotis, however, felt a stubborn pull towards the bushes. He pushed aside a curtain of leaves, ignoring Lo's sigh, and then he grinned. Nestled deeper within the foliage, hidden from casual view, were clusters of berries, not small and withered, but large, plump and gleaming a deep, juicy purple. "Well, look at these then," he called out, holding up a branch laden with the unexpected bounty. Lo stopped, turned, and her eyebrows shot up in genuine surprise, a rare crack in her usually stoic demeanor. After a silent meal of delicious and sweet berries, their small group began their trek northward, their destination the looming silhouette of Water Mountain on the horizon. The dream and the quiet sorrow of their companion weighed heavily on Leonotis's mind. The path ahead was uncertain, and the past, it seemed, walked with them. The overgrown path led them to a small, eerily silent village swallowed by the encroaching woods. Houses sagged like tired old men, their windows dark and empty. A lone figure stumbled out of the trees, his face pale with terror, clutching a bloodied arm. "Bear monsters!" he gasped, his voice ragged. "A whole family of them, at the small cabin in the north end. They attacked everyone." He pointed a trembling finger towards a barely visible track leading deeper into the village. Jacqueline knelt beside the injured man, her hands glowing with a soft blue light as she channeled her healing magic. A visible warmth radiated from her palms, knitting the torn flesh and staunching the flow of blood. A sigh of relief escaped the man's lips as the pain receded. "Thank you," he rasped, his gaze meeting Jacqueline's with gratitude. He then looked at Leonotis and Lo, his expression turning urgent. "This cabin, it's home to a family of 3. I need to go tell the next town over about the killer bear. And you should leave. It might come back out." With that stark warning hanging in the air, he vanished into the dense woods. "We need to help them," Leonotis said, his voice firm. Lo's brow furrowed. "We don't even know if there are any survivors, Leonotis." But if there are, Leonotis countered, his gaze intense, their blood will be on our hands if we do nothing. He turned to Jacqueline, his voice softening slightly. Jacqueline, would you be willing to use your healing again, if needed? A flicker of resolve hardened Jacqueline's gentle features. Yes, Leonotis. Of course. Lo sighed, but her eyes held a determined glint. Then I'm coming too. We stick together. Hesitantly, Leonotis, Lo, and Jacqueline followed the trail. The small cabin was easy to spot. Its wooden walls were scarred with deep gouges, and the door hung crookedly on its hinges. Inside, the scene was chaotic. Furniture was overturned, and the air was thick with the metallic tang of blood. While Jacqueline cautiously approached a still figure lying near the hearth, Lo ventured into a small bedroom. Leonotis followed, his new root sword held defensively. He noticed a smaller figure huddled on a bed, covered by a tattered blanket. Jacqueline knelt beside the first body, her expression grim. "This is the mother," she said softly. "She's cold." The other figure, a man, was lying nearby, his chest rising and falling shallowly. Blood soaked his tunic. Jacqueline immediately began to chant, her hands glowing with a faint blue light as she attempted to mend his wounds. Suddenly, a sharp yelp of pain echoed from the child's bedroom. Lo stumbled backward, clutching her stomach, her face contorted in agony. A large, furry creature, with sharp claws and teeth, darted out of the room and disappeared into the surrounding woods. A long, bloody gash marred Lo's side. "Lo!" Leonotis cried, rushing to her side. It slashed me," she gasped, her breath coming in short, ragged bursts. A large bear ran out of the room and out the front door. "Jacqueline, can you help her?" Leonotis asked, his voice filled with alarm. He picked up Lo and placed her beside Jacqueline. "I don't know if I can heal both," Jacqueline said, her brow furrowed in concentration as she continued to heal the father while stretching her arm to Lo. "Let's hope it wasn't a deep wound." "We have to find that bear," Leonotis said, his grip tightening on his root sword, "before it hurts anyone else." Jacqueline nodded grimly. "Be careful." Leonotis plunged into the woods, his senses on high alert. He focused, trying to tap into the strange green energy that had manifested during the auction. He willed the roots around him to move, to reach out. Tentatively, thin roots snaked out from the base of his root sword, twitching like curious tendrils. He concentrated harder, envisioning the bear-like creature ensnared. Jacqueline's hands glowed with a soft blue luminescence, hovering first over the man's bloodied chest, then shifting to Lo's slashed abdomen. The air around them shimmered faintly as her healing magic worked, knitting torn flesh and staunching the flow of blood. The rhythmic chanting of ancient words filled the quiet clearing. The man groaned, his eyelids fluttering open. His gaze was unfocused at first, then sharpened as he took in Jacqueline's glowing hands and the worried faces of Leonotis and Lo. What happened?" he rasped, his voice weak. "A bear," Jacqueline said gently, her concentration unwavering. "It attacked you and my friend Lo." The man's brow furrowed, a flicker of confusion in his eyes. No bear." He reached out a trembling hand and gently touched Jacqueline's arm, his grip surprisingly firm. "Stop. Heal her. I'll be all right." He gestured weakly towards Lo, whose breathing was becoming less ragged under Jacqueline's ministrations. Jacqueline hesitated, her glowing hands still hovering over his chest. "But you're badly hurt." "It wasn't the bear that did this," the man insisted, his voice gaining a sliver of strength. Or that killed Sarah." A wave of grief washed over his face. "It was a hunter. He poisoned our porridge, to weaken us, to make it easier to capture Reeb. Jacqueline and Lo exchanged shocked glances. Poison, Lo whispered. The man nodded, his eyes filled with a burning rage that belied his weakened state. He knew what we were. He wanted Reeb. For whatever twisted reasons hunters want rare creatures. He coughed, a fleck of blood appearing on his lips. The poison, it made me weak, slow. Sarah, she didn't stand a chance. His voice broke. He looked at Lo, his expression filled with guilt and a desperate plea. The bear, Rehab, he was just protecting us. He's never hurt anyone before. He's just a scared child. Jacqueline's glowing hands shifted entirely to Lo's wound, her healing magic intensifying. The implications of the man's words hung heavy in the air, painting a far more sinister picture of their situation. The escaping villager hadn't been a victim. He'd been the predator. Leonotis spotted the bear near a thick oak tree, its large form surprisingly agile as it sniffed the ground. With a surge of will, Leonotis lashed out with his newfound ability. He stabbed his sword into the ground and roots erupted from the top into the surrounding earth, snaking towards the creature. They wrapped around its legs, then its body, tightening until the bear monster was securely bound to the tree, whimpering in confusion and fear. Leonotis raised his root sword for the final blow, but he hesitated. Was this the right thing to do, he thought. Just then the villager from the path reappeared, his earlier terror replaced by a greedy glint in his eyes. "Hold it right there, boy," he exclaimed, hurrying towards them. "Don't kill it. That's a werebear cub, a rare one. People in the capital will pay a fortune for something like that." He grinned, already envisioning his newfound wealth. "Keep it tied up. I'll just go get my van." He turned to leave. Suddenly, Lo and Jacqueline appeared, supporting the injured father. The man's eyes, though still clouded with pain, widened as he saw the large bear cub struggling against the vines. "Let him go," he pleaded, his voice hoarse but firm. "Please." "He's dangerous. He might kill you next," Leonotis warned. As the father's gaze locked with the trapped creature, a strange transformation began. The fur fell off in chunks, the snout shortened, the claws retracted. In its place stood a small, whimpering child, no older than 2, his eyes wide with fear as he looked at the unfamiliar faces. The father shook his head, his gaze never leaving his son. "He won't, because I'm his father." He looked at Lo, his expression filled with remorse. "I am so sorry about the scratch. It wasn't deep, was it? You probably won't turn." His voice trembled with guilt. "That man, the one who stopped you, he's not a villager. He's a hunter. He killed my wife. He attacked me. That's what triggered my son's first transformation." The hunter's true nature hung heavy in the air. Without a word, Leonotis severed the roots binding the child. The little boy ran to his father, burying his face in his tunic. "We need to leave," Lo said urgently, her hand pressed against her side. "Before that hunter comes back." A silent agreement passed between them. They helped the injured father and his son, and together they retreated back into the woods, leaving the abandoned village and the greedy hunter behind. Leonotis watched the small werebear child, Rehab, now nestled safely in his father's arms, a profound sense of kinship blooming in his chest. The fierce protectiveness in the father's eyes mirrored a longing within Leonotis himself. He thought of Chinaka and Gethi. They weren't his parents, but he couldn't help but worry if they were all right. Then a desperate yearning for his own father, lost to the terrifying grasp of the Oko Agon. Would I ever see him? Would I ever hear his voice? The questions clawed at the edges of his mind, sharp and relentless. Was his father even still alive? Or had he succumbed to the darkness of that monstrous entity? The uncertainty was a constant ache, a dull throb beneath the surface of his newfound resolve. He looked at the small, vulnerable family before him, and a fierce determination solidified within him. He would save Chinaka and Gethi, but then he would find his father, save him from that creature. He had to, because that's what a hero would do.